Good morning. I'm with Max Porterfield of Callinex Mines, CNX on the TSX Venture. Max, how are you this morning?
I'm doing great. I'm very, very excited to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
My pleasure. So Callinex definitely on my radar here in 2025, and it seems like the news flow is starting to pick up. But let's go back in time prior to getting into the news you put out here this morning. So you submitted the AEP application for, I guess, a license that could possibly also allow you to do a bulk sample and start advancing into a full-scale mining operation at Rainbow. So tell me about the submission for the AEP.
Yeah, so the big part about this business, of course, is finding it is one thing, and then getting it out of the ground is a completely other part of the process. And one of the longest lead items to that process, as you know, is permitting. In Canada, the timeline from discovery to production in copper is almost 20 years, and that's considered to be a good thing. But that's been a timeline that we want to avoid, and we want to speed that up. And that's certainly been precedent set in Manitoba for the ability to move things forward much more quickly because of the infrastructure, location, and of course the permitting regime that exists that's put all those mines there and allowed them to produce historically. So what we've done on the back end of things is we've done all the baseline studies as well as the engineering work to submit for the AEP application. And I'm just going to jump over and show you what the preliminary underground mine arrangement looks like for this. Again, that's a full-scale production. The AEP would envision just taking a 10,000 bulk sample from here and you allowing us to ramp down to the deposit. We're looking to receive that AEP potentially by the end of the year. And once we have the AEP in hand, we're then able to go and do the bulk sample at any given point when we're looking to do that, which will allow us access to take a metallurgical testing, understand the dimensions of the deposit, and then also providing a platform for future underground exploration and definite delineation drilling if necessary. Now, broader picture, once we receive the AEP, we're then in a position with additional studies from the baseline environmental work, as well as more engineering work and mine closure plan to submit for an environmental license. And once we receive the environmental license, that allows for full-scale production. So the AEP gets us in front of that process, ahead of the curve, and again, allows us to be able to advance these deposits as we are focused on hitting and discovering additional new high-grade near-surface gold and high-grade copper VMS deposits on the consolidated land package.
So the AEP is an important milestone for the Rainbow deposit. It's an important milestone for Callinex, and having that potentially in hand by year-end 2025 is a big step forward. For investors, what sort of timeline would we be looking at for the completion of the full permitting of Rainbow? You said 20-year timeline previously, but in Manitoba, things are quite a bit faster. Are we talking about another 5 years, another 6 years?
No, I don't think it's another 5 years or 6 years. I mean, that would not be what our wish is. Certainly, we believe that we could be as little as 24 months out of money not being an issue on anything and all that in terms of timelines of getting the work done and getting those permits received. So once we receive the AEP, it's really a function of the incremental work that then needs to be put in place and provided to the regulators for review of the environmental license. And then that creates the next window of being processed. But you've got to keep understanding is we've now been in front of the environmental regulators from day one. And when I say day one, I mean from the submission of the AEP, as opposed to walking up for the very first time with a full-blown application for an environmental license. So it's a way no different than us being in communication with policymakers within Manitoba on the very first discovery hole of Rainbow. We've maintained that relationship and want to make sure that we're in front in advance and communicating our intentions with the supporting documentation as early as possible.
Okay. So AEP for Rainbow anticipated in the next year and potentially by the end of 2025. So let's talk about the news here this morning. Visionary, some new target areas, so some new areas of focus for Callinex. This looks pretty exciting. Tell me about it.
Well, you just mentioned it brought a smile to my face. So I think if you got a genuine read on how I'm feeling about it, I feel great. Before we step off the slide, because picture is worth 1,000 words. Remember what Rainbow looks like on a long section. Again, where it starts, how deep it goes in the strike extent of Rainbow as we move forward on exploring on different areas of the property. If you looked at Callinex just even a couple months ago, you would have been seeing a company that was exploring a deep discovery at depth to the south of the property as we were doing all the work to lead us into the AEP. Where we are today is we're much different. We have the AEP submitted. We've now unencumbered this entire land package that previously had a back-end provision over an area of that, and we've done a huge amount of work to digitize that and come up with these target areas where we're seeing an opportunity for near-surface immediate resource growth of high-grade copper and gold on the property on first pass. Now, the two areas that we're going to talk about right now and immediately are going to be the Visionary. And the Visionary is located right here. It's a long strike from where we're recently exploring a descendant within this growth fault corridor. And there's one historic copper deposit called Leo, and there's a number of historic gold showings, and we'll get into that. And then after we move from Visionary, we're going to go off to the north to the General, where there's a historic gold deposit, and we believe that there's a 5-star opportunity, so to speak, for making a strong, big base metal discovery with that. So let's first jump to Visionary. And what you're looking at here is a chargeability survey that was completed by Ore Resources. And in terms of our exploration approach and our track record of success, that's where we've had a lot of successes with IP. We did IP in 2019 over Rainbow, or where Rainbow now sits, and then we tested that and then used more traditional borehole EM vector tools to find Rainbow. Now, here at Visionary, this IP chargeability survey is highlighting a strong over 500-meter strike anomaly right here, and then another over 300 plus meter, 350 meter, 400 meter long anomaly right here. That's also includes the historic Leo deposit, which is a small deposit, very cautionary in nature in terms of that, of a couple 100,000 tons within the first 500 feet. But again, very cautionary on that historic resource, and that makes up a very small portion of this much larger chargeability anomaly. Now, taking a step back, these major VMS systems in the Flin Flon Camp and globally also oftentimes come with a very significant gold zone that sits in the hanging wall. You see that in the Snow Lake area with the Lawler mine. Hudbay just announced and surpassed 1 million ounces of gold production at Lawler, which is known as more of a base metal mine to the common public. But again, that gold zone would sit in the hanging wall or flank it about 200 meters away. And that's what you're seeing there, is you're seeing high-grade gold in the modern drilling that was testing this. For example, 0.4 meters, 140 gram per ton gold. 0.36 meters, a 75 gram per ton gold. And so this is over a significant strike extent and open at depth, because it's very shallow, any of the drilling that's been done in this, and very sparsely. And we'll be showing you something in a moment as we move forward to the General about what we could potentially visualize as to what could come here at Visionary. Now, looking at this chargeability that's associated with the base metals and Leo, again, a lot of the drilling was done inaccurate historically in our interpretation, or had it right when they were approaching it, but they just didn't go deep enough. So what we're going to do is I'm going to show you a long section of our interpreted long section as it sits today for the that chargeability at vision area, which includes the Leo deposit. You're hitting mineralization all the way from HB14, a historic Hudbay hole, over here to a strike extent of over 350 meters, considering where the Leo mineralization is associated with. Again, drilling below the 200-meter level up until the mid-1990s was on this interpreted horizon, did not occur outside of the holes that ore did. And that allows for a potential for a near-surface high-grade copper deposit to extend and continue at depth over significant strike. When you look at the first hole that Ore Resources drilled in the area, they had a big off-hole anomaly, which is pointed in this direction. That included in that drilling over 3 meters of 5.33% copper, 0.66 gram per ton gold, so very high grade. And then again, going back to your memory that you had on Rainbow, that vertical nature at Rainbow, you have the same thing that exists here and in other areas of the property, of course. But again, it's near vertically below the shallow 147 hole on this total window of 8.5 meters of 3% copper. So again, you're getting near surface high grade mineralization. You're also intersecting that mineralization at depth. And then the other more recent hole that was drilled to the north of the plunge line, it's interpreted, had a big off-hole anomaly that was followed up, but that hole was drilled too far to the south. So we're excited to follow up here, test our interpretation near surface of this mineralization, as well as re-enter and bore a hole out to increase the size of that hole on this hole 25 at depth here, where it intersected the horizon, roughly about 365 meters underground, and allow that to be used as a platform for a traditional borehole EM that's more modern, much stronger, because again, these are smaller holes. Borehole EM was in its infancy in the 1990s. And again, their own recommendation was to put it in 3D and to continue to follow up those off holes with drilling. And no one's followed up, and that's a huge opportunity for us. So for that, I'm very grateful for, and I think we should all be grateful for that as shareholders, for those that are our current shareholders.
Max, can you zoom out and show us again where Leo is and where Visionary is on the bigger picture property map?
Yes, certainly. So stepping back out again, this is where Visionary is, that area. It's along strike from Baker Patton and Descendant, and those deposits and Cabin, that mineralization that sits there, and that big alteration system.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got that big plumbing system that's also being here. You see it through historic mapping. You see it in the geochemistry. You see it in the chargeability. You see it in multiple different data sets. So again, these occur along these horizons. It's intervals. And these are just kind of the initial hot spots.
So the historical drilling at Leo seems like, based upon that section that you showed, was only about 300 meters deep. And it's interesting that they intercepted some pretty high copper grades in some of those holes, and there's some evidence the copper grades are increasing at depth. Do you have any idea why that previous operator didn't follow up on those hits?
Well, I mean, all operators, no different, follow up with have capital restrictions. If you look at their following recommendations, they recommended a follow-up hole to test what they're seeing in 19. Hole 99 didn't have any big off-hole anomaly, but again, your relative distance on something and the strength of your technology at the time. Today, we've got a hole. I've got half of a rainbow hole right here on my desk. We've got a hole that's twice this thickness, right? This is just cut in half. Back in the 90s, your hole was half that size, roughly. So your probe was new technology at the time. It was a much smaller, much less power, and much less space to fit the technology in. So when we look, there's only one single hole that was, at depth there in terms of where we would consider deep relative to VMS deposits. And how much could you actually see? You're still hitting the system. You're still hitting the alteration in the logs. And it's just a function of a lack of technology, funding, and where we were. This was never digitized. I mean, they were using AutoCAD. They couldn't turn everything around and look at anything. Things have changed a lot. It's crazy. It's that quarter of a century ago. It's aging us, But it's a quarter of a century ago in '99 when they were doing that. And so that's just a huge opportunity. And not only that, but the advancements of understanding of these VMS systems. We, as operators and explorers and management of this land package, have learned tremendously as well. And no one has had the time, and time is the most valuable thing, time and obviously money, to understand these things and put it all together to create the exploration model that we are able to show you. It's a lot easier to see things now with the tools that we have and the understanding that we have. It looks, easy. It's no different. You can tell that I'm in art. It's no different than a painter. A painter, Picasso could go sketch something in 20, 30 seconds, and then it'd be worth, thousands of dollars. And then you argue, well, what was this? You just threw it on the back of a napkin. But it took years for him to create the reputation, to create the stroke of the brush or the pen, to create the art that quickly, right? Whereas this could take others could put this together, but it could take others a lot longer to put this together than we're able to now put it together because of how much time we've invested on other areas and put this broader regional model together.
Yeah, this is your 100% focus here, Callinex and the Flin Flon area of Manitoba. So these VMS, deposits tend to cluster. We know that for sure. There's multiple big, VMS camps in Canada. Flin Flon is one of them. This is a prolific camp with multiple mines and large copper, gold, silver, lead, zinc ore bodies. And Callinex, you've convinced me there's more discoveries to be made here on your ground in Flin Flon, and your commitment to this area is impressive. That's for sure. So 2025, what's the plan this year? Where are you going to drill?
So I've shown you what we're doing right here at Visionary. Visionary, we're going to be testing to confirming our interpretation. Near surface, we'll be looking to re-enter the hole if possible at depth to increase the size of it and use that as a platform for vectoring underground and get a better snapshot at depth. We'll then also look to test and follow up to this very high-grade gold near surface along this chargeability. And then I want to jump over real quickly and show you to the north, because I think they can help crystallize what we're seeing in the opportunity we're there. So this is now looking at a cross-section looking north. You have Visionary here with just showing copper, and this is the mineralization associated with around the Leo area and that chargeability. And then to the north, this is turned on where you see the Alberts deposit, which is associated with the general. And the general gives us marching orders, and the marching orders to the north is that there's a tremendous opportunity to find something of significant stature in will be equivalent to the Leo, to the Alberts, and to the north. So when you go to the north there, this is a plan section, plan section showing you Leo. I'm sorry, the Alberts gold deposit. And what you'll see is that there's been no work done over here. And so next steps in this area would be to do a IP survey to highlight the opportunity with this gold system, and then what would be the flanking VMS system that should be the originator of what put the gold there eventually. And that's a huge opportunity, and that's going to be mimicking the approach that you see to the south, where you have that chargeability, the gold associated with that chargeability, and then the base metals. And that is part of the exploration approach to the north. And then when we kind of zoom out, not to get granular, we'll be following up with a similar type of opportunity on Amulet. Amulet is similar in terms of much less work in the 40s and 50s. It's a long strike from Rainbow. And then we're also going to be following up with Blueberry that we previously have talked about before, and we've announced releases on it, where we need to do some borehole work there. So again, immediately drill testing where we see opportunity for near surface resource growth out of the gate, where we've discussed, and then doing the groundwork geophysically to put us in place to hit additional high grade near surface and build very, very big scale. Because again, keep in mind, the average strike for a lens in Flin Flon's 100 to 150 meters, and they're very elongated. The strike extent and footprint near surface over that chargeability associated with the Leo mineralization is hundreds of meters long, several hundred meters long. And then you can see the associated gold trend being a significant scale. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to be outlining that in more detail as we move forward. But bigger picture, we've gone a long way from unlocking this big land package, bringing it together, and then bringing the path forward for significant resource growth well beyond what we've established with Rainbow and the Pine Bay deposit.
So you have Rainbow. You've done the submission for the AEP at Rainbow. The receipt of the AEP for Rainbow will be an important milestone for the company. In our last conversation, you said, well, the market perception is that Rainbow by itself is too small, and you're obviously focused on changing that perception and showing that you have more scale, making a new discovery at the Pine Bay camp, and the visionary target area, the general target area are the two areas of focus now to make that new discovery. How significant would it be for Callinex to find another Rainbow deposit, Max?
Well, a Rainbow would be significant in the context of where we are. So Rainbow's initial throughput, along with the Pine Bay deposit, you're looking between 13 to 1,500 tons per day. And that goes strictly because of the dimensions of the deposit. What we're looking to achieve with replicating just a Rainbow is you could double your initial throughput to 3,000 tons per day. 3,000 tons per day puts you in the scale of a major VMS producer like 777 that was producing 3,000 tons per day in terms of its overall scale. It bona fides well over 2,000 tons per day as well, which I think is key. But beyond that, a Rainbow would be a success. The vision is something multiple times the size of Rainbow. So if we stumble and we find a Rainbow, that's great, and it's going to be a huge win for us. But what we're ultimately looking and I believe that we're going to achieve, and we're on to in these areas, visionary, the general, the elder, which we didn't talk about, and there's others, is anchor, big scale that could be 5, 6 Rainbows in one in terms of the potential. And that goes back to your strike. The strike extent, for example, for the 777 mine, that's 26 million tons, is 225 meters, right? And because for every 1 meter of strike, they're elongated and they plunge significantly. So getting into a new one is great. Our vision is so much bigger than that. But Rainbow on its own, another Rainbow would be big for us.
And just picking your brain here, just hearing your thoughts about permitting and sort of the mood in Canada. I saw that an election has been called for the end of April. How does this affect junior mining in Canada? Does it affect it at all? What kind of words are you hearing from provincial and federal government about permitting for a critical mineral like copper, for example?
Well, there's a lot of things that are very positive. I think it's a good thing. A lot of folks might look at it as turmoil and volatility, and volatility is a lot to stomach, and I understand that. But from the position that we're in, and exclusively looking at it from our position as an exploration company in Canada, this is sort of like a dream come true, because it does multiple things. The critical minerals that have always been critical but not as appreciated, I think, by the general public, are being thrusted on the international spotlight, not just here in Canada, but on a global basis, and not just for critical minerals, but you're also having for precious metals as well. I think it's going to highlight the need for Canada as a country to work much more strongly together. Americans wouldn't understand it in the context that, you know, there were tariffs from state to state. So you're incorporating doing business within your own country that has brought that down. You've seen a unified approach from premiers across different provinces, but in talking about particularly Manitoba, has been a very, very strong rhetoric that they're looking to support critical minerals. They want to support their strong workforce, and they seem rather defiant, like it or not, with the situation with our neighbor to the south in the United States. Fundamentally, though, when you look at historic production in Manitoba, none of it has ever gone to the United States. It actually historically goes to Europe or to Asia, or you can also be sourced in Canada as well. With some smelting operations here in Canada, there was actually historically a smelting operation in, unfortunately, Flin Flon that was shut down a number of years ago. So that's where I think Canada lost its competitive advantage, is its ability to smelt the operations in Canada. With that being said, in Flin Flon, there's direct rail access to the Port of Churchill. That has just had its first shipment with Hud Bay, giving it access to international markets. So the response is positive on all fronts. It needed to happen. It's the best thing that could have happened, quite frankly. And this is an advantage position to be in, because again, we're the only copper deposit. They've expanded the funding federally for critical critical minerals, where it was slated more towards like battery construction as opposed to production. And I think that's, again, things that we're going to be able to tap into as we become more and more advanced and we execute with our objectives.
Yeah, it's interesting what the Trump administration announced last week in terms of the executive order, which seems very favorable for mining in the U.S., for hard rock mining. I'm sure some politicians in Canada are taking a look at that executive order and saying, okay, maybe we need to think about some of these same things here in Canada. So I don't know.
Well, beyond that, though, not to interject, but it's I'm an American and a Canadian. I'm a dual citizen. Okay, so when I say this, I don't mean any disrespect, but it's very onerous exploring in the United States. And if I were to choose two jurisdictions, I'm picking Canada, hands down. The cost to explore in Canada is much more favorable. The permitting regime in Canada is much more favorable. And the knowledge base, quite frankly, of mining in Canada in the workforce is much more favorable. So when you're a company that doesn't generate revenue, you've got to go, okay, I need to manage risk. I got to manage geopolitical risk. I need the money to go the furthest. I need to reduce exploration risk. That's why we favor what we're doing. And truthfully, I couldn't imagine a different place I'd want to be right now than where I'm at and where we're at as a company, what we're focused on.
Yeah, that's
that's genuine.
Yeah, no, that's a good point you make. And there's a huge advantage to being in a mining camp that has a long history of mining and exploring for metals like Flin Flon. Max, great chat with you today. Visionary General. I'm really looking forward to some drill results from Visionary once we get there at some point later in the year. I'm sure we'll get together to talk about those. Thank you for your time.
Thanks so much again for having me. I'm excited as well.
Cheers.